March 15th, 1924, North Atlantic Ocean. The ocean was a monster of black ink and white foam. The SS Prometheus, a grand steamship meant for a new era, was being torn apart by a storm that felt personal. In the upper decks, the rich screamed and clutched their pearls, but in the belly of the ship, in cabin 4G, there was a silence more terrifying than any scream. 12 orphans sat there. They were the children of a broken Europe, survivors of a war that had taken their parents, now being shipped to America like unwanted furniture. Their only world was this small, windowless room. "Why is the floor tilting, Miss Helena?" asked 5-year-old Leo, clutching a wooden horse with a broken wheel. Miss Helena, the caretaker, tried to smile. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "The ship is just dancing with the waves, Leo. Hold your horse tight." Suddenly, a sound like a thunderclap echoed through the hull. The ship groaned, a deep metallic shriek of twisting iron. The lights flickered and died, plunging them into a darkness so thick it felt like velvet. "Stay here! Don't move!" Helena shouted. She lunged for the door, but it wouldn't budge. The captain, in his panicked protocol to prevent steerage passengers from flooding the lifeboats, had ordered the lower deck doors locked. "Help! Open the door!" Helena screamed, pounding her fists until the skin broke. Outside, the corridor was already filling with freezing brine. Inside, the water began to hiss through the vents. It was ice cold, the kind of cold that steals the breath from your lungs. 3-year-old Emily climbed onto her bunk, holding her porcelain doll Lulubelle above the rising water. "Don't cry, Lulubelle," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Mommy is coming. She promised she would find us." But Mommy was a ghost in a trench in France. The water rose to their waists, then their chests. The children didn't scream anymore. They began to sing a soft lullaby, their voices bubbling as the salt water reached their lips. They clutched their toys, their teddy bears, their soldiers, their dolls, as if these pieces of wood and fluff could carry their souls to heaven. When the SS Prometheus finally slipped beneath the waves, it took the 12 children with it. They were buried in a tomb of steel, 3 miles down, where the sun never reaches. November 1st, 2024, SS Meridian, Mediterranean Sea. 100 years later, the world had forgotten the Prometheus, but the ocean had kept its treasures. The SS Meridian was a giant of the modern age, carrying 347 souls and thousands of tons of cargo. Deep in the hold sat a special shipment bound for the Titanic Museum in London. Among the rusted portholes and silver spoons was a crate that looked out of place. It was made of heavy oak, sealed with lead, and smelled of ancient salt. Security Chief James Thornton shone his flashlight on the label. "Property of Titanic Research Institute. Contents, the Prometheus Orphanage Collection, 1924. "Why the lead seals?" James asked, his voice echoing in the hollow hold. Mr. Richardson, the museum's curator, adjusted his glasses. He looked pale in the flickering fluorescent lights. "Because, James, some things aren't just made of matter. Some things carry an emotional weight, a residue." James laughed, but it sounded forced. "You mean ghosts? I've been at sea for 20 years, Richardson. The only ghosts I've seen are in a bottle of rum." "Open it," Richardson said quietly. James pried the lid open. A chill, sharper than the ship's air conditioning, drifted out. Inside were the toys. They were perfectly preserved, as if the salt had mummified them. There was the wooden horse, its paint faded, a lead soldier missing an arm, a teddy bear with one button eye, and in the center, the porcelain doll. Its face was a spiderweb of cracks, and its blue glass eyes seemed to reflect a light that wasn't there. As James reached out to touch the doll, the lights in the cargo hold flickered. For a split second, he saw a wet, small handprint on the side of the crate, but when he blinked, it was gone. "Is it safe here?" Richardson asked. James wiped a bead of cold sweat from his forehead. Yeah, it's just a box of old trash. We'll be in London in a week. But as he walked away, the heavy iron door of the cargo hold slammed shut behind them, not from the wind, not from the ship's tilt. It slammed with a force that suggested someone or something was finally glad to be home. November 1st, 2024, 02:30 a.m. The SS Meridian breathed with a mechanical rhythm. The hum of the massive engines was a low-frequency lullaby that kept the 347 crew members in a state of deep artificial sleep. But in the corridors of Deck 4, the silence began to curdle. Steward Carlos Rodriguez was finishing his late-night rounds. He was a man of habits, a father of 2 girls back in Valencia, a hard worker who found comfort in the predictable metal world of the ship. He was adjusting his tie in a hallway mirror when he heard it. Whoosh. It wasn't a mechanical groan. It was a thin, high-pitched sound, a sob, a baby's cry, so sharp and mournful that it felt like a needle piercing the eardrum. Carlos froze. Is someone there? Mrs. Gable, is the baby okay? He thought of the few families on board, but he was on the wrong deck. This was the service corridor leading to the cargo elevators. The crying intensified. It wasn't coming from a room, it was coming from the ventilation shafts. Carlos pulled out his radio. Bridge, this is Rodriguez. I have a sound disturbance on Deck 4. Might be a cat in the vents or a child. The radio crackled with static. Rodriguez, repeat. There are no children registered on Deck 4. Check the cargo hold door. It's showing as unsealed on our monitor. Carlos felt a drop of sweat slide down his spine. The air was getting colder, not the chill of a breeze, but a heavy, damp cold that smelled of rotting seaweed and stagnant salt water. He pushed open the heavy steel door to the cargo hold. The lights inside were flickering, humming with a dying energy. In the center of the room, the SS Prometheus crate sat open. The lead seals hadn't been cut. They looked like they had been melted from the inside. The crying stopped instantly. The silence that followed was even more terrifying. Carlos stepped closer, his boots echoing on the metal floor. Clang, clang, clang. He reached the crate and shone his flashlight inside. The toys were gone. The horse, the soldier, the bear. Empty spaces remained in the straw. Only the porcelain doll was there. But it wasn't lying down. It was sitting upright. Its cracked porcelain head turned slowly, creak, creak, until its blue glass eyes locked onto Carlos. "Mommy?" the doll whispered. The voice didn't come from its mouth. It echoed from the shadows in the corners of the room. Carlos froze. No, I'm not your mommy." "You have warmth," the doll said, its voice growing distorted, layered with 11 other tiny ghostly voices. "We are so cold. We have been under the water for so long. Give us your warmth." Carlos turned to run, but his feet felt heavy, as if he were walking through deep mud. The floor of the cargo hold was no longer metal. It was covered in a layer of freezing, salty water that hadn't been there a second ago. He reached the stairs, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Suddenly, a small, pale hand reached out from between the stair slats and grabbed his ankle. The touch was like a band of dry ice. "Don't leave us in the dark again," a voice whispered. Carlos tripped. His head hit the steel step with a sickening thud. As his vision blurred into darkness, the last thing he saw was the porcelain doll crawling toward him, its cracked face widening into a smile that revealed rows of tiny, jagged teeth. November 1st, 2024, 0700 a.m. Captain Marcus Delacroix stood in the medical bay, his face a mask of iron. On the bed lay Carlos. He was alive, but barely. His skin was a translucent shade of blue, and his breath was coming in shallow, shuddering puffs. Dr. Sarah Chen was staring at the monitors in disbelief. "Captain, this makes no sense. His core body temperature is 32 degrees Celsius, 89.6 degrees Fahrenheit. He is in a state of severe, late-stage hypothermia." In the middle of the Mediterranean? In a room that's 22 degrees? Marcus asked, his voice low. Look at his hands, Captain, Sarah pointed. Carlos's fingers were white, frozen in a curved position, as if he were still clutching something. And there, tucked under his arm, was the porcelain doll. It looked harmless now, just a broken antique, but when Sarah tried to pull it away, she hissed in pain. It's ice cold, she cried, pulling her hand back. It's like touching a block of dry ice. James Thornton entered the medbay, his face pale. Captain, we checked the security footage from the hold. You're not going to believe this. They walked to the bridge and pulled up the 0300 recording. The footage was grainy and filled with snow, visual static. They watched Carlos enter the hold. They saw him approach the crate. But as Carlos backed away, the shadows around him seemed to lengthen. They weren't just shadows, they were shapes. 12 small, blurry figures, like children standing underwater. They swarmed him, and for a brief second before the camera feed cut to pure static, the porcelain doll appeared to stand up on its 2 feet. James, the captain said, his voice trembling. What did we bring onto this ship? James looked at the screen, his eyes wide. We didn't just bring toys, Captain. We brought the hunger of 12 dead children. Suddenly, the ship's intercom crackled to life. It wasn't a crew member. It was a recording, or a memory. An old nursery rhyme sung in a distorted, scratching tone echoed through every speaker on the ship. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Papa's gonna buy you a mockingbird. Below the song, a wet, dripping sound began to emanate from the ship's walls. The hunt had officially begun. November 2nd, 2024, 0200 a.m. The atmosphere on the SS Meridian had shifted. The air felt thick, heavy with an invisible moisture that made the walls sweat. The crew moved in hushed whispers, looking over their shoulders. Carlos was still in the medbay, his eyes open but vacant, whispering a name over and over. Helena, she couldn't open the door. Miguel Santos, a veteran sailor who had spent 30 years on the roughest seas, wasn't a man given to superstition. But that night, as he lay in his bunk in the crew quarters, he couldn't stop shivering. He had turned the heater to its maximum setting, yet his breath came out in pale puffs of mist. Click, clack, click, clack. A sharp metallic sound echoed from the floorboards. It sounded like a tiny hammer hitting the steel deck. Miguel sat up, his heart thumping. Who's there? Is that a joke, Lopez? No answer, only the hum of the ventilation. Miguel reached for his flashlight and clicked it on. The beam cut through the dark, illuminating the floor. There, standing in the center of the cabin, was the lead soldier. It was barely 4 inches tall, missing its left arm, its red uniform faded to a dull brown. It was the toy from the Prometheus crate. How in the hell did you get here? Miguel muttered. He reached down to grab it, intending to throw it into the corridor. As his hand closed around the metal figure, the soldier's head snapped upward. Its painted eyes were gone, replaced by 2 tiny glowing pinpricks of blue light. Left, right, left, right. A tiny raspy voice marched through Miguel's mind. We are marching to the bottom, sailor. It's so quiet there. No wind, no storms, just the heavy water. Miguel screamed and threw the soldier against the bulkhead, but instead of falling, the toy stuck to the wall. Then it began to grow. Not the toy itself, but its shadow. The shadow of the one-armed soldier stretched across the wall, expanding until it hit the ceiling. It looked like a tall, distorted boy with a jagged, missing limb. The shadow reached down, and Miguel felt a crushing weight on his chest. It was the weight of 1,000 tons of ocean water. Please, Miguel gasped, his lungs burning. March with us, the shadow whispered. November 2nd, 2024, 0730 a.m.
The sun rose, but it brought no warmth to the SS Meridian. The crew found Miguel in his cabin. He was curled in a fetal position, his hands frozen into claws. On his chest, the lead soldier stood perfectly upright, its tiny bayonet pointing at his throat. Miguel's core temperature was 31 degrees Celsius. He was alive, but like Carlos, his mind was gone, trapped in a 1924 nightmare. Captain Marcus called an emergency meeting in the wardroom. The air was frigid. Even the coffee in their cups had grown cold within minutes. "It's a contagion," Dr. Sarah Chen said, her voice trembling. "It's not a virus. It's an energy drain. These things, they are consuming our heat to build their own world. If we don't stop this, the ship will become a block of ice before we hit the Atlantic." Ship Officer Elena Rodriguez slammed a folder onto the table. "I spent the night in the archives. I found the secret manifest of the SS Prometheus. The 12 children, they weren't just orphans, they were state wards. The captain of the Prometheus was ordered to lock them in to prevent panic among the first-class passengers during the sinking. He left them to drown so the wealthy could have more room in the lifeboats." A heavy silence fell over the room. "They aren't just sad, they are angry. They are looking for the captain. They are looking for the man who kept the key." Captain Marcus looked at his own set of master keys sitting on the table. They seemed to glint with a sinister light. "I'm not that man. I didn't do this." "To them, every captain is the same man," a voice whispered. Everyone turned. Richardson, the curator, was standing in the doorway. His skin looked like parchment. "The toys are their anchors. We must return them to the sea. We must give the children what they were denied. A burial." "No," Marcus shouted. "We throw that crate overboard and the museum will have my head. Those are multi-million-dollar artifacts." "Captain," James Thornton stepped forward, "look at the windows." Marcus looked. Despite the Mediterranean sun, the thick reinforced glass of the bridge was beginning to crack, not from pressure, but from ice. Frost was creeping across the glass in the shape of small, frantic handprints. "Throw them over," James pleaded. "Now." November 2nd, 2024, 1500 p.m. The captain, James, and 2 deckhands went down to the hold. They brought a hydraulic lift, expecting the crate to be heavy, but when they reached it, the air was so cold their skin began to crack. The crate sat in a pool of what looked like seawater, but it was bubbling. "On 3, lift," James shouted. The 4 men strained. The hydraulic lift hissed and groaned. The crate, which should have weighed maybe 200 pounds, felt like it was made of solid lead. It felt as if the entire weight of the sunken Prometheus was anchored to it. As they dragged it toward the cargo elevator, the lights failed completely. In the darkness, 12 pairs of blue eyes ignited. "Why are you throwing us away again?" a girl's voice sobbed. It was Emily. "Is it because we are dirty? Because we are wet?" another voice asked. The crate began to shake. The wood groaned as if something were trying to punch its way out. Move it now," Marcus yelled. They reached the deck. The wind was howling, a sudden localized gale that whipped the sea into a frenzy. They pushed the crate toward the railing. "Ready?" James shouted over the storm. But as they leaned into the crate to give the final push, the lid flew off. A wave of freezing black water erupted from the empty box, knocking the men back. From the crate, the toys rose into the air, suspended by invisible threads. The teddy bear, the doll, the soldier, the horse, they hovered in a circle. "You can't throw us away," the voices whispered in a haunting harmony. "We have found a new home, a warmer home." The crate slammed shut on its own, and suddenly it was light as a feather. Marcus looked at his hands. They were covered in frost. He looked at the sea.
100 feet away from the ship, a shape was rising from the water. It was ghostly, translucent, and massive. It was the bow of a 1920s steamship, rising like a phantom to meet them.
The SS Prometheus had arrived to claim its toys and its new crew. November 3rd, 2024, 02:30 a.m. The phantom ship had vanished back into the mist, but the SS Meridian was no longer a modern vessel. It felt like a decaying ruin. The hallways were lined with a thin layer of salt, and the smell of the deep ocean, a mix of old iron and cold rot, was everywhere. Dr. Sarah Chen was huddled in her office, clutching a tablet showing a picture of her daughter, Lily. She was trying to stay awake. She knew that sleep was the doorway they used. If you slept, they entered your dreams. If you slept, they took your heat. Her eyes drifted for just a second. Drip, drip, drip. The sound of water hitting the linoleum floor snapped her eyes open. The door to her office, which she had locked and bolted, was wide open. Standing in the doorway was a small figure. "Lily," Sarah whispered, her heart stopping. The girl was the right height. She wore the same pajamas Lily had worn when Sarah left London. But as the girl stepped into the light, Sarah saw the horror. The pajamas were soaked. The girl's skin was a pale, translucent blue, and her hair was matted with seaweed. "Mommy, why did you leave me in the dark?" the girl asked. Her voice was a distorted echo of Sarah's daughter, layered with the gurgle of water. "You're not Lily," Sarah gasped, pressing her back against the wall. "Lily is safe. Lily is in London." "It's so cold, Mommy. My fingers fell off in the water. Look." They held up their hands. They weren't hands, they were the wooden hooves of the broken horse toy. The girl began to walk forward, and with every step, the room's temperature plummeted. The glass jars of medicine on the shelves began to shatter from the sudden freeze. Sarah felt a sharp pain in her chest as her lungs struggled to breathe the frozen air. "Stay back!" Sarah screamed. She grabbed a heavy medical book and threw it, but it passed right through the girl as if she were made of smoke. "Just a little warmth, Mommy. Just a hug. One hug and the shivering will stop." The girl reached out. Her fingers touched Sarah's throat. It didn't feel like skin. It felt like a collar of liquid nitrogen. Sarah's vision began to fade into a snowy white. She was dying. November 3rd, 2024, 0300 a.m. While Sarah fought for her life in the medbay, Captain Marcus was being hunted in his own cabin. He hadn't slept for 48 hours. He sat at his desk with a loaded flare gun, watching the shadows. Suddenly, the temperature dropped so fast that the glass of water on his desk exploded. A woman appeared in the corner of the room. She wore a long black Victorian dress that was heavy with water. Her face was pale, her eyes sunken into dark pits of sorrow. "Captain," the woman whispered. Marcus leveled the flare gun. "Who are you? One of the passengers?" "I am Helena, the one who failed. I watched them die through the glass. I heard them calling my name until the water filled their lungs. For 100 years, I have tried to keep them calm, but they are tired of being calm. They want to go home." "What do they want from us?" Marcus roared. "I didn't sink the Prometheus." "They carry their anchors," Helena said, pointing toward the cargo hold. "The toys are not just objects. They are the jars that hold their souls. As long as those toys exist in this world, the children will remain in the cold. They are trying to steal your life because they think it will make them warm again, but it won't. It only creates more ghosts." "How do I stop it?" Marcus asked. Helena moved closer. She smelled like old rain. "The fire. Not a fire of hate, but a fire of release. You must burn the toys. But be warned, Captain. They will fight you. They are afraid of the fire. They think it is the darkness coming for them again." "James, Sarah, come in!" Marcus shouted into his radio. A distorted, chilling laughter came over the frequency. It was the sound of 12 children playing a game. "The doctor is sleeping, Captain." We are playing hide and seek. She's the one hiding, but we found her. November 3rd, 2024, 04:30 a.m. Marcus burst into the medbay just in time. Sarah was on the floor, her skin covered in a fine layer of frost, her eyes rolling back. The ghostly girl was gone, but the wooden horse was sitting on Sarah's chest, its eyes glowing with that cursed blue light.
Marcus kicked the horse across the room and scooped Sarah up. "Wake up, Sarah. Breathe." He dragged her toward the bridge where James and Elena were waiting, armed with emergency axes and fire extinguishers. "The ship is dying, Captain," James said, pointing to the control panel. "The salt water is in the electrical system. The engines are seizing up. We're losing power." "We're not losing the ship," Marcus said, his eyes burning with a desperate resolve. "Get the metal barrel from the deck. Get the high-octane fuel from the chopper pad. We're ending this tonight." "But the toys, they moved again," Elena whispered. She pointed to the center of the bridge. There, arranged in a perfect circle, were all 12 toys. The doll, the bear, the soldier, the horse, and the others. They weren't moving, but they were humming, a low, vibrating sound that made the very steel of the ship tremble. Around the toys, 12 small shadows began to grow. They weren't blurry anymore. They were becoming solid. They were becoming real. "Go," Marcus whispered to James. "Get the barrel. Elena, get the fuel. I'll keep them busy." As his crew ran to prepare the ritual, Captain Marcus stood alone before the 12 toys. He felt the cold encroaching, the ice forming on his uniform. "I have the key now," Marcus said to the empty air, "and I'm opening the door." November 3rd, 2024, 5:30 a.m. The pre-dawn air was thick with a supernatural fog. The SS Meridian groaned, its engines finally falling silent as the supernatural frost choked the life out of the ship's heart. On the main deck, the wind howled with the voices of 1,000 storms, but there was no wind on the sea. The water was flat, black, and silent. James and Elena dragged the heavy steel drum to the center of the helipad. Sarah stood by, her hands trembling as she held the fuel cans. They were all breathing out thick clouds of mist. "They're coming," James whispered, looking toward the bridge. The heavy steel doors of the bridge didn't open, they simply froze and shattered like glass. From the darkness emerged the 12 toys, sliding across the deck as if pulled by invisible strings. Behind them followed the shadows, 12 small shivering figures, their eyes glowing like blue stars. "Wait!" Captain Marcus shouted, stepping between his crew and the ghosts. The children stopped. The youngest, Emily, stepped forward, clutching the porcelain doll. Her face was no longer terrifying. It was profoundly sad. "Is it time to go into the water again?" she asked. "It's so deep. We can't see the sun from there." "No," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. He knelt so he was eye level with the ghost. "No more water, Emily. No more darkness. We're going to give you light." With a sudden movement, James grabbed the toys one by one. The spirits shrieked, a sound that shattered the remaining windows on the bridge, but the crew didn't stop. They threw the doll, the soldier, the bear, and the horse into the barrel. Elena poured the high-octane fuel. The scent of gasoline masked the smell of salt for the first time in days. "Do it, Captain!" Sarah cried. Marcus struck a long match. As the flame flared, the 12 children let out a final, heart-wrenching sob. They surged toward the barrel, trying to reach their anchors, their only connection to the world they had lost. "Be free!" Marcus yelled, and he dropped the match. Flash! The explosion wasn't orange. It was a pillar of sapphire blue light that reached hundreds of feet into the sky.
The heat was instantaneous and overwhelming, melting the frost off the railings in seconds. In the heart of the blue fire, the toys didn't melt, they evaporated into golden dust. And then, the transformation began. The 12 shivering, wet shadows stepped into the flames. As the blue light washed over them, their wet clothes turned into bright white garments. Their blue skin became warm and radiant. The crew watched in awe. Emily stood at the edge of the barrel, no longer a ghost, but a beautiful child made of pure light. She looked at Marcus, then at Sarah, and smiled. A real warm smile. "Thank you, Captain," they whispered, in a voice that sounded like a summer breeze. "The door is open." One by one, they floated upward, rising like embers into the morning sky. The spirit of Miss Elena appeared at the edge of the deck, her black dress turning to white. She bowed her head to Marcus, took Emily's hand, and together they ascended until they were nothing more than 12 new stars in the fading night. The fire vanished. The barrel was glowing red hot, but it was empty. Not a single piece of porcelain or lead remained.
November 5th, 2024. London Docks. The SS Meridian limped into the port of London under the soft gray light of a drizzling morning. The ship looked like it had been through a war. The paint was peeled, the windows were boarded up, and a layer of salt crusted every surface. Carlos and Miguel were carried off on stretchers. They were awake now. Their fever had broken the moment the blue fire died out. They didn't remember the shadows or the toys. They only remembered a feeling of intense cold that had suddenly turned into a dream of a warm summer day. Captain Marcus stood on the pier as the museum representatives approached. Richardson was among them, looking older than ever. "The collection, Captain?" Richardson asked, his voice trembling. "The insurance adjusters are demanding a report." Marcus looked the man in the eye. "It's gone, Richardson. All of it. A fire in the hold. We couldn't save a single item." "A tragedy for history," Richardson sighed. "No," Sarah Chen interrupted, stepping up beside the captain. She was holding a phone showing a live video of her daughter Lily playing in a park. "It was a tragedy 100 years ago. Today was a mercy." As the crew dispersed, Marcus returned to the ship one last time to collect his logbook. The ship was quiet. The heavy, oppressive weight was gone. He walked past the helipad where the barrel had stood. The steel was scorched in the shape of a perfect circle. In the center of that circle, protected from the London rain, sat a single small item. Marcus knelt and picked it up. It was a small white carnation, fresh, fragrant, and warm to the touch. It was a flower that shouldn't exist, a gift from a place beyond the sea. He tucked the flower into his pocket and walked away. The 100-year curse was over. London, Titanic Museum Archive. 1 week later. A young intern named Thomas was working late in the basement archives, sorting through a newly arrived shipment from a salvage operation in the North Sea. "Crazy," Thomas muttered, looking at a crate labeled SS Britannia, 1931, recovered nursery items. He pried the lid open. Inside was a small silver music box. He wound the key. A tinkling, slightly off-key melody began to play. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word." Thomas shivered. "Is the AC on? It's freezing in here." He turned to leave, but a small, wet handprint appeared on the back of his yellow vest. From inside the crate, a tiny, muffled voice whispered, "Are you the captain? Do you have the key?" Thomas froze. The lights in the basement flickered and died. The end.